Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Penny Bishop, Dean of the BU Wheelock College of Education and Human Development, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this month's Conversations with the Dean. This series explores issues that matter in education, always through the lens of our Guide Star commitment to transforming systems that impact learning and human development. Last month, we explored the fun topic of the role of curiosity and productive uncertainty and sense-making in science learning. Today's topic has a more serious focus, the role of federal education research in promoting equity, driving innovation, and informing policy. With ongoing uncertainty in federal funding, we'll explore what's at stake and how research is making a difference right now. I'm thrilled to be joined today by three outstanding BU Wheelock faculty members. Dr. Elizabeth Bettini studies special education teacher working conditions and workforce shortages, and particularly focuses on how they contribute to inequities by disability, race or ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. Dr. Naomi Caselli leads interdisciplinary research ensuring deaf children's access to language, spanning sign language literacies and education. She is also the director of the A&I in Education Initiative here at Boston University. And finally, Dr. Leslie Dietiker. Dr. Dietiker serves as Associate Dean for Research here at BU Wheelock. Her own research focuses on how mathematics teachers interpret and use curriculum materials with the goal of creating more meaningful math learning experiences. So welcome to all of you. I've been really looking forward to this important conversation. So let's dig in. Leslie, I'd love to start with you in your role. Can you provide us with a view of the current landscape? What's the current state of federal education research funding, and what should we be paying attention to?
Sure. I would say right now we're in a period of real disruption. There was a set of executive orders that President Trump released that um, outlined a new vision and a set of priorities for the government. And in response to that, government official released a memo that tried to put in place a pause on research funding and activities. Now, while we had a court system that overturned that pause and that memo ended up getting rescinded, the consequences have unfortunately had ripples throughout the system where there's been lots of disruption to funding. There's been a lot of uncertainty at institutions that are research focused, like Boston University. So I should say that during transitions of government, small disruptions are expected. But what's different this time around is there's a real challenge and gutting of federal agencies. So we have institutions like the Institute of Education Sciences, which goes by IES, the National Science Foundation, for example, or National Institutes of Health. And these, unfortunately, these agencies have seen their workforce, in many cases, really slashed. Their funding that's being proposed for a future year is uh, being reduced dramatically. That really threatens their ability to oversee the nation's efforts in educational research activity. Um, and at the same time, research that's underway in institutions like BU that these existing research projects have been terminated outright. These aren't just any old research projects, but these are actually the best of the best. They are vetted through a very competitive process and rigorous process by scientists who are experts in their field. So these research projects that were given funding were underway and then have been interrupted, leading to an incredible waste of millions of dollars of investment that the government has previously put into these studies that now the American people will not learn the outcomes of many of these studies. Um, so basically, I wish I had some good news for you, but there's not much bright news on the going forward. These agencies that are now hobbling with a reduced workforce are also being influenced, I think, by political realm. And so where these funding decisions on what used to get funded were made through scientific means as well as what was the benefit for society, now often have a layer of political review to them, and that is new and in many cases concerning. So um, basically, there's a large question, I think, about whether or not the type of excellent research that our country has been known for in the past is going to continue. So, Naomi, I want to invite you to join the conversation. I know that you've recently lost a grant through this termination process. Could you tell us about that project and then tell us a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, certainly. So we set up this conversation with the dean, and then just last week, unfortunately, we found out that one of our substantial grants was lost. It was a $3.4 million grant that was given from the NIH. It was a collaboration between ourselves and the University of Rochester. We were in our second year of the project. And the goal of that project specifically was to look and support deaf and hard of hearing children. Most deaf and hard of hearing children, I should say, are born to hearing parents. And that's important because many of them are receiving technology such as hearing aids or cochlear implants, speech therapy, and the like. But very often, those technologies are not allowing children to have an intact access to language. So, deaf children are really working hard to have access to language in early childhood. And that impacts any number of things in terms of development, brain development, and mental health, their social and emotional help. And this could be lifelong impacts. So, with that said, this is a really public health crisis as it pertains to deaf and hard of hearing children. And we were really trying to address that within our project and thinking about how often deaf and hard of hearing kids are having to suffer from these tragedies, from these missed opportunities in terms of access to language, and figuring out which types of supports are successful and how do we identify when these children are having these situations and when we could track what's happening with these kids. So, with that said, that was the goal of the project that we were in process. And we were learning that the project, excuse me, when we learned that the project was terminated, it was not because of the science, actually. We actually scored better than 83% of other proposed projects in the cycle. So, from a scientific perspective, it was never an issue in terms of NIH. But that project was funded through a program that was designed to support new researchers who were, you know, essentially blocked from being scientists previously. And so deaf researchers are very often not given opportunities. They're put by the wayside. They're overlooked in the scientific process. People are thinking that communication is difficult given cost barriers and the like due to interpreters. And so we thought within this program, we could offset this type of economic imbalance and set up some specific programs that could support our deaf colleagues. And within this, it was advantageous, not simply because we care about equity, right? But also because the deaf perspective is so valuable. Deaf scientists can contribute so much to this work, so much to giving communication to our deaf kiddos and analyzing that population. And deaf scientists can give us a lens that we otherwise can't give as hearing professionals. And partnering with this, with the University of Rochester, part of this, all of this was cut. And this is quite unfortunate. And this mechanism, we really weren't able to continue with, which is quite unfortunate. And we've been trying to figure out different ways that we can participate and work alongside our deaf colleagues.
Naomi, thank you so much for explaining that. I really appreciate it. And I can imagine that in these uncertain times, um, it's challenging not only for those of you who have had grants terminated, but also for those who are trying to keep their own research going. And I'm thinking of you, Liz, in that regard. Could you sort of share with us a little bit about what it's like for you right now, given the concerns that abound?
Yeah. First, I just want to say, Naomi, I'm so incredibly sorry to hear that. What a loss in terms of what we would have learned from your project. What a loss to all of the folks who were going to benefit from the work that you were doing, the families and the children who were going to benefit from that project. Not to mention the staff who would have worked on it. So I'm really sorry to hear that, and just think that's a tremendous loss for our country that that project is not happening.
Yes, thank
Um,
you. Thank you for that.
yeah, my all of my projects currently have somehow they're somehow still standing at the moment for the moment. But the current environment has introduced just a tremendous level of uncertainty and instability in those projects. Research requires long-term planning. It requires us to think several years ahead of time to plan for, which districts we're going to partner with, which teachers we're going to partner with. Once we've developed an intervention, the process of developing some kind of tool or product for schools to use, it requires, about a year of development, some pilot testing, iterative improvement, randomized controlled trial, and then, development of a system through which people can use it. That's at least a 4-year cycle to develop a rigorous and robust product. Um, and so it requires a lot of long-term planning on our part. All of that has just, we are really struggling to figure out how to orient ourselves to our work in a context of such great uncertainty. So we, for example, make commitments to districts that, we're developing this product and we're going to work with you next year to pilot it in your district, or we're going to work it with you in 2 years to do a randomized control trial so that your teachers can benefit, your students can benefit. And we're not able to make those commitments right now. We're not able to, in good faith, say to a district, yes, we will support you. So I'll give an example. One of our projects, we're developing a working conditions intervention for special educators who work with students with emotional and behavioral disorders. So this is a population of students who have typically mental health challenges that impede their success in school. And their special educators tend to experience more challenging working conditions than other teachers. Um, those working conditions are not because of the kids, it's because of the ways that they're supported in their school. And as a consequence, those teachers tend to have really high attrition rates, really high burnout rates, which impacts the quality of services students receive. So we have this, very vulnerable population of students who is consistently being served by novice teachers who don't yet know how to serve them effectively. And so this working conditions intervention is designed to help schools better support those teachers so that the teachers can better support the students. So we are in year one. We've developed this intervention. The federal government has invested now hundreds of thousands of dollars in the development of this intervention. And we're not able to say to schools, yes, we commit to working with you on piloting it, or yes, we commit to doing a randomized control trial of it. There are schools all around the country that are asking us for this intervention. There's definitely a need for it. And yet we're not able to make those commitments. There's a lot of uncertainty, certainly for our staff, who don't know if they're going to be employed. And so we've been doing a lot of kind of contingency planning around, all right, with the funds that we have, can we possibly support one school within this district that we have a relationship with? Can we possibly do some smaller version of the project? And so just a tremendous amount of time and energy is getting spent on contingency planning as opposed to long-term planning for the success of this product that the federal government has invested their energies in. So it's been a really challenging space to navigate, even without having lost a project at this point. Penny, you're muted.
You'd think after 5 years of doing this, I would be able to talk and remember to take the mute off. Thank you, Liz. Thank you for explaining how it's affecting you and your team, and importantly, the research that you're doing. And I appreciate how each of you has brought a different lens to helping us build a picture here of what what it means for us right now and what it means for the future. I want to invite members of the audience to please use the Q&A feature to ask any questions that are arising for you. I'm sure that you have many, and we're welcome to we are happy to weave them in, so you're welcome to put them in there. While you're thinking and doing that, I'd like to come back to you, Naomi. I'd love for us all to think a little bit about what's being lost. What's being lost as federal education research is underfunded or deprioritized or eliminated. We got a little bit of a sense of that from you, Naomi, and I'm wondering if you could take maybe a step up from that and speak a little bit more broadly about it.
Sure. I think that there are many impacts. I'll try to summarize them. I think an example of one that comes out of our project is deaf children, right? Thinking about deaf children and the suffering, as well as their families that are really catch as catch can in terms of educating their children and thinking about utilizing tests that are not working. In addition, these families and these parents need evidence-based research to guide them in terms of what it is that they should do. And they need to move quickly, right? This is not something that they can wait on. The impact on deaf kids is completely preventable, right? But families need to know how to prevent these issues and what they need to do and the steps that they need to take. Clinicians and teachers and, professors and the like need to be able to support families. And without that evidence-based research, kids are suffering. And we see that when language deprivation happens to hearing kids, it's a nationwide emergency, right? People are suddenly panicked. Every psychologist or psychology class or linguist class has talked, ad nauseum about this very thing. But when it happens to deaf kids day in and day out here in 2025, where's the emergency? Why aren't we sounding the alarm? And we're finally at this place where we do have some federal funding to support these very issues, to build a foundation for these kids. And it's not just our grants, there were several grants that were deaf related that were just terminated at the very same time. And the support for deaf kids is just going by the wayside, and their families is hugely impactful. And so I think that that's one type of issue that we can draw attention to. And importantly, another type of impact is that grant that was cut, the $3.5 million, was most of the funding was spent on people, right? Was spent on deaf faculty, deaf researchers, deaf individuals, and it was cut retroactively, right? Going back. So now we're suddenly scrambling to figure out where these folks are going to survive. What are they going to do tomorrow? How will they feed their kids and their families? These, deaf researchers, these professionals, how do they move forward? And this is not the first time that one of our team members already had their funding for their PhD research cut, right? And then they switched to our project to continue, and then that funding was cut. So we're seeing this domino effect. People's lives are being played with. And it's not simply, this equitable responsibility that we have here, but the fact that these cuts are specifically happening to programs that are designed for people who are already experiencing barriers, the people that are already marginalized in the science field. These are people who are already feeling the burden of cuts, generally speaking, day in and day out. And so this is what causes it to be such a difficult conversation to have and to face.
Mm. Naomi, thank you for putting such a human face on this problem. We really appreciate that. Liz, I'd like to ask you the same question. So as you think about this circumstance, what's being lost? What's being lost?
Yeah, I mean, I think in addition to the direct impact on children and families that Naomi was alluding to, I think what you also heard in her comment is one of the things that I find most scary is that the pathways for people to become scholars are disappearing. These projects provide training. They provide opportunities for the next generation of researchers to develop the knowledge and skills so that they can ask the questions that we don't even know we want to ask yet, the questions that will be really pressing and urgent for schools to answer in 10 years, and 20 years, and 30 years. Our country is the leader in the world in education research. We're the leader in the world in almost every area of research, and that is because we have the institutional capacity to prepare folks through from bachelor's to master's to doctoral, postdoctoral, and into positions as faculty members. When these projects disappear, those training opportunities disappear as well. So I am worried about the next generation of scholars. How are we going to develop the next generation of scholars who can keep developing knowledge? The things that I find in my projects, I want someone to build on them. I might be wrong. I might find things that are right now, but are wrong 5 years from now, are wrong 10 years from now. And I want there to be someone who has the knowledge and skills to say that and to say, hey, actually, we've got a better way now. No one can do that if we're not able to train the next generation of scholars.
Thanks, Liz. And it strikes me too, as someone, as a former teacher myself, I think about how much I relied on evidence-based practice, interventions that I knew were scientifically supported to make choices about my own pedagogy, about curriculum and such. And that is an extraordinary loss. So thank you. And Leslie, how about you? How are you thinking about this and what's being lost?
Well, I really appreciate the question because I think sometimes um, the argument is made that funding is just shifting from the federal government to the state level for research. And um, I'm concerned about that. A lot of the research, I think that, like, for example, Naomi and Liz's research that we've just heard about today, are really good examples of this, are targeting problems that actually are not at the state level, but actually are shared across all states, that these are pressing problems that are not just found in Massachusetts, but are found in Ohio and Hawaii. And in fact, outside of the US too. And because when we have federal funding, we have then competitions that really ask what is needed across the board that solves fundamental problems. And those then get really good attention from really smart people. Um, and it's not like I'm not saying that state research is not valuable. It certainly can be, and it can answer really important questions from a location, but it's just not effective or efficient to have researchers in Massachusetts trying to answer the same question as in Indiana and in California, and having basically, so many research dollars trying to answer some of the same questions just at the local level. And instead, where one really well-designed project couldn't answer those questions more definitively across the country. Um, and at the same time, many of these states, ours included, do not have the infrastructure in place to have the robust review of grants that would come in at a regular level. So it would just also be very costly to set up a system like that in each state. It's just not sustainable. So I'm very concerned about the loss that both Naomi and Liz mentioned, but at the same time, just the loss of answering these questions that really permeate our country. Like, how do we retain teachers, and what ways do students learn math best? And, how are our students doing? Those kinds of questions are everywhere.
I'll just
Thank you
give
so much.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, please, Liz.
No, Leslie, to your point, I'm thinking, for example, of the national data that the National Center for Education Statistics collects. So for those of you who aren't familiar with them, the National Center for Education Statistics collects a number of nationally representative data sets and makes them available for free to researchers. One of the most famous that you're probably familiar with is the NAEP, the National Assessment of Education Progress, which shows how students are progressing academically in all 50 states. Another example is the National Teacher and Principal Survey. This is one that I've used quite a bit in my research. So they survey teachers and principals all around the country. That data set is then made available to me for free. It's made available to my colleagues for free. And it allows us to ask questions of national significance without having to go out and survey, thousands of teachers. So it really facilitates the research process. It makes it much more efficient for us to conduct that research. I've asked a number of questions using that data set about the special ed workforce. That data set has helped us understand that we have a special education teacher shortage that is national. It's helped us understand why we have a special education teacher shortage. What are the predictors of special educators choosing to leave the job? What can administrators do to keep them? We know a tremendous amount about the special ed teacher workforce nationally from this one data set alone that the federal government has collected annually on all of our behalf. States do not have the capacity to do that. We as individual researchers do not have the capacity to do that. I fielded my own survey. I got 171 participants and I was thrilled. This data set has thousands and thousands of participants. I can ask much better questions with it. It is a huge loss to not have that collected at the national level.
That is such a powerful example. Thank you, Liz. We have a question from the audience, and I'll open it up to any of the three of you or all. What kind of chilling or avoidance have you seen, either from yourselves or from colleagues?
So I'll answer. So researchers are being put in a position right now where there is a sense that only certain things can be said in research proposals, and that there are only certain ideas that are accepted. And at the same time, the rhetoric says that we want to, that we want to have a broader sense of free speech, and yet it really feels like there's a closing or a reduction of the types of ways faculty and researchers can express themselves. So in some cases, I know some researchers who are being asked to change the nature of the things that they've written. I have seen some concerning requests that are about changing the nature of the research for political purposes. And to me, that is it's very upsetting to see people put in a position where they have to make decisions about the ethics and the responsibilities they hold to the field and to their principles. So.
Thanks, Leslie.
I think one consequence of the vagueness of the edicts that we are currently under, they're very vague, they're very unclear, they're not defining key terms. And I heard someone say the other day, when we're unclear where the line is, we take a guess and then we step five steps back. That's what people do. My team is trying really hard not to do that. We're trying really hard to honor the basis of our research and the science and not worry about that. At the same time, we are working with partners who are worried, right? So we've had school districts that have been concerned about, oh, if we sign on to this project, are we going to get in trouble? Particularly in states where they are under, Stop Woke Acts and things like that. So in one instance, I have a colleague who was doing a project about disproportionality, and her school district partner withdrew because they were concerned about the consequences to them. So she was sticking with her guns and saying, we're going to keep working on this. The school district partner starts to feel uncomfortable because this is addressing a very serious racial equity problem that we've known has existed for a really long time. So sometimes the caution is coming from all different parts of the ecosystem. And is absolutely chilling research. That's very important.
Thank you, Liz. I can
Can I
imagine.
add another thing? Another thing. Many of us have spent, I would probably maybe 50 hours is understating it, developing proposals for research that are now sitting in agencies that are gutted and not even looking at them. And it is a tremendous loss. And I'd say that in the response to your question about the chilling effect, it's causing a lot of people, I think, to question, do I trust that if I put this effort into another proposal, will it be reviewed? Will it be taken up in ways that I think basically the system used to work? We now can't rely on it as much. And I think that it's causing people to reconsider to what extent am I going to expend energy that I'm not sure will go anywhere.
And that makes me think too of the thousands of scientists who sit on peer review panels who may feel similarly. So yeah, yeah. So I would imagine that there are a number of folks in our audience who are wondering, sort of what can we and members of our country do to support continued federal funding or to advocate for it. Sort of it's easy to sort of throw up our hands and feel a little helpless in this moment, especially given the seriousness of our topic today. Can you provide any suggestions or any ways that we could be helpful? Maybe I'll ask Naomi to start. Naomi, would you be willing to start?
Certainly. Yeah. I mean, I think that if you're interested in showing support in terms of education research, and specifically as it pertains to nonpartisan research, speak up about things that matter to you within your social circles, raise awareness. I think that's very important. And in some cases, donate if you're able. If you're able to help, sustain those causes. I mean, we can't sustain all of the work and replace that federal funding. We can't, America has to figure out a way to become more stable in terms of those federal dollars. But we have been doing a fabulous job in terms of supporting research, and we can't replace that. But we need to figure out ways to, in our small way, bring that money and bring those causes forward.
Thank you. Other ideas, Leslie or Liz?
I think one of the things that has kind of astounded me in the last few months that I just didn't realize how little the average person knows about the role of the federal government in education research. Even I think teachers who I've talked with are like, oh, well, does it matter if NCES? I mean, how does that affect me as a teacher? And they are not necessarily seeing the linkages between that federal funding, the research we do, and the practices that they're using in their classroom. I was talking with a teacher who had that perspective, and I was like, you know, Jenny, your school uses positive behavior interventions and supports, and I know you love it. And did you know that that was funded by all the research on that was funded by the federal government, right? Not all, most of it, a lot of the research on that, right? A lot of schools right now are trying to improve the quality of the literacy practices that they use to teach students how to read in the early grades. The research they're relying on was funded by the federal government. And I think we could all collectively, we as researchers, but also everyone who's listening here, do a better job of communicating the value of that funding for our students in our schools. Students all around the country are impacted every single day in positive ways by research that the Institute of Education Sciences has funded, that the National Institutes of Health has funded, that the National Science Foundation has funded. And communicating that, sharing news stories that communicate that, make sure that your neighbor knows how their kid's education has been impacted by Institute of Education Sciences funding. I think that would be a tremendous help.
Thank you, Liz. There's an irony in there that it has been perhaps so effective in the past that we've been able to sort of overlook it or take it for granted, perhaps. Yeah. Yeah.
Sure. And if I could just add one more thing, just to Liz's point, I think that one of the biggest losses is that historically we've had bipartisan support as it pertains to research and science. It's not been a political issue or a political question that we've had to face, right? There's been very broad support for this work. Disagreements about specific issues, certainly, But generally speaking, the idea that we have world-class research institutions and science that's been happening has been supported ongoing, and we don't have to change that, right? We can still value those positions and we can still value that support. It's not about picking a side, right? It's not about that when we're having these conversations about valuing kids and valuing the future of their education, right? That's not one side or the other when we're having these conversations.
Mm. Such a good point, Naomi. Thank you. You know, I was thinking as you were describing, Liz, the nature of the country, our country's contribution to education research globally, and having been seen as a leader for a long time in that space. And now hearing about other countries who are offering opportunities up to US scientists. Have any of you had any experiences with that? Do you know anyone who's in that situation, or have any of you been reached out to?
I have not been reached out to. If I had done, I would, I probably
Relieved,
wouldn't say in this forum, but I have not
relieved to hear that, Liz.
But I do have a good friend who is moving to Canada. She was offered a position and is leaving a premier research institution here in the United States for a very different kind of position in Canada, and is doing so in part because she was experiencing a lot of constraints on her research in the state where she was living, and a lot of uncertainty and about the future of the work that she was doing in that state. And she is going someplace where the work that she does is very welcomed, valued. And I'm really happy for her, and I feel so sad for our country. I feel so sad for the districts that she was partnering with, whose students were benefiting from the work that she was doing.
Mm.
It's a tremendous loss.
Mm. Thank you for telling us about it.
Yeah,
Naomi.
and if I may say, in a soft way, it's not like leaving per se, but which work do we focus on, right? Where there's funding available. So the funding is available for supporting the development of international work. So we've done more shift in focus on those types of international projects, whereas the federal government isn't going to give us that attention. We're going to increase the amount of work that we're going to do with our international partners in terms of other signed languages. And it then benefits those countries instead of benefiting our children and spending our time investing in our deaf kids here. So that's kind of what's happening for us. It's a soft kind of transition to international research.
And I actually, that's quite a good segue to a question that we have from one of our attendees. It is, can establishing new collaborations among researchers be a solution? What do any of you think about that?
I think I would not say solution, I'd say stopgap.
Mhm.
Um, I think that nothing can replace the scale of support that the federal government has provided in the past. I think there are things that we can do to get by, to keep our lines of research alive, but they will not be thriving in the ways that they have been able to be thriving under the support of the federal government. Um, there's just no other actor in the system that is capable of providing the level and quality of support that the federal government has provided.
Thank you, Liz. Leslie, did you have a comment?
I was going to say, I agree with Liz wholeheartedly. I think that the nation's researchers are a very creative, very smart group, and will continue on in certain ways. But I think Liz said it best. It will come at a cost of the extent to which that research can be impactful and available for the public.
Mhm. Mhm.
I just want to say it's not just about the amount of money, right? The amount of money is impactful, but it's also about the expertise that the federal government has developed within their federal funding agencies about how to vet research, There is tremendous expertise within the Institute of Education Sciences, National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health, all of the organizations that fund our research. There's tremendous expertise about what constitutes good science, about how to work with researchers through the peer review process to ensure that the very best proposals are the ones that are funded. That expertise there are limited spaces in which it exists in a much smaller form, such as the Spencer Foundation or the WT Grant Foundation. There are some foundations that have that expertise on a much smaller scale. So it's not just about the amount of money, it's about the quality of the peer review that the federal government has provided.
Yes, and the nationwide competition, right? When we have to compete with every other researcher in the country. And, the low rate of funding, the opportunities. I mean, 10 to 15% maybe of applicants are funded. That means that we really are identifying the best of the best because the, huge number, the rate of researchers, and we're thinking about, the silo of work, and you're thinking about the competition, you're really going to get the best, and we're not going to have the same number of competitors if we work independently and not as a team with the nationwide search.
Well, I can't thank you enough. I know that I am thinking slightly differently about things as a result of this conversation, and you've really helped push my thinking on the value of this of the federal education research system, not just the money, but the system and the impacts. So I appreciate you taking the time to help me and our audience think differently. I want to really also thank our interested audience because this is really important work and not everyone takes time out of their day to think about this. And so we encourage you to continue to share what you've learned today with others as we thought about what we could all do to think about that and think about how you can use your own networks to help educate others about the importance. And if you are interested in further study, we'd love to hear from you and to welcome you to BU Wheelock. So there's an email on the screen if you're interested in advanced degrees or anything related to our admissions office. We've summarized some of the action items that our folks mentioned today, and we invite you all to put ideas that you have in the chat. If you have other ideas, this would be a great time to share them with others. And to please fill out the survey that will load into your browser at the end of the webinar, because we would really love to hear your ideas for fall webinar topics. I know that many of you actually return each month, and we appreciate that. And we're always interested in knowing what you'd like to learn more about from our faculty. If you're an alum, I really want to point out that we have a summer celebration on Friday, June 27th. We'll feature a tour of the campus of our beloved historic Wheelock College, and that will include the Wheelock Family Theater. And it'll conclude with a lunch at the Alumni Center here at the Castle. And if you've not yet received an invitation, please reach out because we really would love to make sure that you could be there.